Hi, this is Russell Glasser, host of the Atheist Experience. You know, the Atheist Experience is made possible by volunteers and the generous support of viewers like you. If the promotion of positive atheist culture and separation of church and state are values that you hold, please consider contributing by becoming an ACA member or visiting our product page at evolvefish.com under the Partner tab. Thank you.
All right, welcome to the Atheist Experience Live. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Heina Dadabhoy.
Hello.
This is, we're live September 27th, 2015. I've got a little bit of a, I don't know, cold/throat thing, so I'm just going to let her do all the talking.
Yes.
It's been Bat Cruise weekend, so we went out last night to almost see some bats. They flew along the tree line.
We heard the bats, at least. Heard the cute little squeaks, so, you know.
And once we got out, we were able to look up and see some of them coming out at the end of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we had the Bat Cruise weekend and had a great time. But here's with this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, I guess, your background and what got you from there to here?
Ooh, okay. Well, I'll try not to rewrite the memoirs right here. But the short story is I was born and raised in the United States as a Muslim. And I was super nerdy about it, as I am about everything. And as it turns out, with a lot of those Abrahamic religions, the more you know about them, the less you find to like about them. Mm-hmm. And eventually that did come to a head, and I took philosophy classes in college. That didn't help either. That broke it all down. And I came out as an atheist when I was 18, so almost 10 years ago now. And I've been doing atheisty stuff ever since.
Awesome. So you blog and you run around.
Yes, I blog at Free Thought Blogs. My blog is cleverly and confusingly called Heinous Dealings. So it's freethoughtblogs.com/heinous. And I run around the country. Whoever invites me, I generally say yes. And I do, I go out on podcasts and things like that. So yeah, it's been good. It's fun.
So we're live. This is a program out of Austin, sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin. We're in the studio. We're constantly making adjustments to the tech stuff. Thanks everybody for your patience as we transition through this. But let's go ahead and queue up a caller here. I guess we'll start with Aline in Lisbon, if they're ready to go. Whoop, I hear something. So dead air is always fun.
Yes, it is.
That's good. Yeah. So this is live TV, just like it's always been for years. Mm-hmm. So where are you off to next?
Well, next weekend I'm going to be at the North Texas, I think Free Thought, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Or East Texas, is it?
It's in Nacogdoches.
Yeah, that's where it is. Yeah. But yeah, I'm going to be speaking there, and then a couple of weekends from then, I will be at the, it used to be called the Sexy Secular Conference, and now it's the Unapologetic Feminist Conference. And but probably most of the speakers who have been there for the past couple of years are probably still going to be talking about sex, so that's always fun.
It's a good topic.
Yeah, and that's in Akron, Ohio. Fun little college sort of city.
All right, do we get a caller queued up? Well, I'm guessing not. Pick somebody else.
No God feels for us, I guess.
Yeah, so last week we were at Apostacon, mm-hmm. and that's where I ended up getting this cold. So tomorrow night I'm speaking at Baylor University, mm-hmm. If I can speak, which is why we need to get the callers on here and heavy lifting. I want to address a couple technical issues first, not the one we're currently having. But if you're going to write in to talk about something that's going on with the show, specifically during this transition period, the audio's too low here, it's too high here, whatever else, it'd be really helpful if, first of all, you just mention the episode number and roughly, hey, at this point, or maybe throughout the whole thing, this particular audio is too low or too high, or whatever the actual problem is, give us slightly more information. And it'd probably also be helpful if you didn't just immediately jump to you guys suck and why haven't you thought about X, Y, and Z? Because we are all freaking volunteers here, and I've been traveling, and the guys here have been doing a great job of trying to keep making improvements. I think we've got Jason in Tel Aviv. You there?
Hi.
Hey,
Good.
thanks for waiting.
Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Very nice.
Kind of.
I had a question. This is my first time calling into the show, first of all. Recently I get a lot of junk from my family on Facebook. Some of them have become fundamentalist Christians. And so I just I read the Manual for Creating Atheists by Boghossian, and he suggested like asking questions and trying to be really kind of disconnected from it. You know what I mean? Trying to get them to think and to process and just answer basic questions. So whenever I try to do that, it tends to turn really defensive really quickly. So they'll post a question, post a picture of the 10 Commandments or something like that, and then I'll just ask a question like, is this something that you would like to be like the law of the land in the States? You know, these types of questions, and immediately they start saying, don't try to take away my faith, why you was attacking, and these types of things. Is there a way that you know of that I could approach these types of questions or these types of situations and not get a defensive response, a way that I could actually open up conversation and get them to challenge the basis of the way that they think without causing offense?
I know something about having a really religious family. So you said that they recently became more fundamentalist Christians. How recently was that?
I guess in the last year and a half. I haven't been home. I haven't been to the States really for about 8 years. Mm-hmm. And it's really strange to see it pop up on Facebook suddenly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's tough when someone, part of it probably has to do with the fact that they're so, if it's only been in the past year, they're probably feeling a little bit defensive because they just recently got into it. And so they're probably interpreting any sort of questions as you challenging them or trying to, take something away from them that they just recently got into. So I think some of the defensiveness will probably fade with time. But yeah, I know how frustrating it is when you're just trying to have a conversation with them and they turn it into this whole defensive thing. Definitely the more question-based approach is good, but questions can come off as challenging sometimes, depending on tone or the wording or things like that. So could you maybe give me an example of a situation?
Oh heck. Let's see. It's my aunt especially. She's posting stuff like, "If I didn't have Jesus, I couldn't survive," or something like this. And so I would just ask her, I'm like, "Well, before you became a Christian, how did you handle these types of situations, or how did you feel about your life at that time?" Mm-hmm. And it just immediately, like, her first response in every situation, no matter what the topic is, her first response is, "Stop trying to take away my faith." She doesn't give a chance for a conversation to develop in any way.
Okay, then stop pushing.
Yeah, I was about to say, right now you're kind of, she's new to it. When someone posts something like, "Without Jesus, I wouldn't survive," they're affirming something about themselves, and when you question it, they're taking it to be like, you're saying, "Oh, well, you survived before. Clearly, you don't need this." Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I would say that if you don't want to start fights, probably pushing against that sort of thing is not the best option, I guess. And
you lose a lot online as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially Facebook, where you don't have voice. Mm-hmm. They can't hear the tone of voice or whatever. All they see is your words. They
can't see the sincerity. Like, you can't look at them sincerely and say, "I'm legitimately curious." All they're seeing is sort of the text on the screen.
Yeah. Well, sometimes my questions have been of that sort. That it's like, I want to find out, how did she come to this? Where did this come from suddenly?
That would probably be best handled in a conversation with her that's not comments on her Facebook wall. Probably a phone call or even an email thread and say, "Hey, I'm actually legitimately, sincerely interested in your conversion story." And if you frame it as, "I want to know how you converted," people love talking about their conversion or deconversion stories. Like, that's especially people who have strong beliefs one way or the other. So I would say if you framed it more as, I'm interested in your life, please tell me about your life and your experiences, then you might get a more positive response.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. Well, maybe I'll take that type of a track with it. So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much. Hina, it's the first time I listened to you. You look beautiful and wonderful. Matt, I've heard a lot of what you've had to say in debates and everything online, and I just want to say that I'm very happy to be able to talk to you for the first time. I'm going to enjoy the show, I know, and thank you so much for listening.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm just sad I don't look beautiful and wonderful.
Well, I could have done your makeup before we got here.
I don't know if it would have helped at all. Let's go ahead and queue up Hugo in Brazil while we get some other callers on the line. One of the things is, in the same way that you don't owe anybody an explanation, you don't have to have a conversation with anybody. Just because a relative of yours is posting something on Facebook or they're a new believer of whatever religion doesn't mean that they're actually interested in having the conversation.
Exactly.
And if you try to have conversations with people who aren't ready to have them, who don't want to have them, you're going to come off incredibly negative, no matter how honest or sincere you are about trying to actually, have a conversation, and especially for new believers.
Oh yeah.
Because you think about people who've been, a Baptist, a Catholic for 25, 35 years, and how little they actually know about the religion that they are involved with. New believers are sometimes on fire and ready to talk at the drop of a hat, and others, they probably don't have a particularly good understanding. They haven't been in it long enough to be equipped to defend why they believe, and it may be the right time in some cases to talk, and it may be the wrong time. But as soon as you start getting the pushback, you've got to try a different tactic. I mean, I know that Anthony's had a lot of luck with Peter Boghossian's technique. I think there's a variety of techniques that we need to use, because not everybody believes for the same reasons. Not everybody's going to be giving it up for the same reasons. Not everybody's in it as deep.
It's true. I mean, I've had the least luck in having conversations about religion with the potential of getting people to question with moderate believers, because, they're not as angry or fired up or as involved.
So did we get another caller queued up? I see 3 on the list, but we'll keep going. So I don't know if you actually want to get into this, but I mean, you come from a Muslim background.
Yep.
You've had conversations with family and friends.
Oh, yes.
How productive have they been, kind of on average? I mean, it's have you changed people's minds? Have you come up against just brick walls?
Mostly, honestly, with the more explicit conversations about religion, where we're sitting and talking about religion, the results are not immediate, and if there are any at all. But just being around them has actually had a good effect. A lot of people have started moderating their behavior and their words, at least around me, and sometimes even with their own children and things like that, in a much more positive way. So I think just sometimes leading by example is a good way to be, too. It can be helpful.
I think we're on with Matthew in the UK. You there, Matthew?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, nice to chat to you two. How are you doing?
Good.
Did you enjoy the back cruise?
I did,
Yes.
although I probably did more harm to my voice over last night's events.
I hope to eventually join you guys down there one year for that.
That'd be great.
It was really fun, yeah.
Yeah. I was hoping while I had the opportunity to chat to Hina while she was on here, I was wondering how seriously people that you know take missed prayer, Islamic prayer. Because I had a friend back at school that I was chatting to about this, and it was kind of strange that he was talking to me about the punishment that you get for it, and he fully believed this kind of thing, but yet still didn't seem to take it too seriously.
Well, I mean, praying 5 times a day is really hard. You have to disrupt your whole routine, and you have to be ritually pure, so you have to be washed and all that stuff, and you have to find a place. And there's a whole Islamic song you can find on YouTube called "The Crazy Places I've Prayed." And yeah, people pray in all these random places because, you're just in the middle of your day. I would say that it runs the gamut. I mean, there are people like my mother who, when she was younger, was not very religious, and she tried for years to make up every single prayer she had missed for something like 8 or 10 years. And she finally got so frustrated and upset that she talked to her religious teacher, and her religious teacher said, you know, don't worry about making up, you're better now. You know, you were a sinner and now you're redeemed. But then, you know, there are a lot of people who didn't take it that seriously because, you know, whatever, they just try to pray and then they, you know, they hope that God will forgive them. I tried to take it seriously, but honestly, it was really hard. Even as fundamentalist religious as I was, I couldn't wait for my period so I didn't have to worry about praying for a week.
Yeah, it seems like quite a big ask to every single day have to pray 5 times a day.
And
so.
it's boring. Prayers, you're reciting the same thing over and over again. And even if you kind of understand what you're saying, like me, most Muslims don't even know what they're saying. Like, they don't know Arabic. And, you know, it's, you're bowing, kneeling, standing. It's just, it's boring. It's great to not have to do that anymore.
Yeah. I had one other question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
For both of you, I guess, because I know you've both said that you're into philosophy. I was just wondering if there's anything philosophical or, I guess, maybe like moral and ethical issues that you think even most skeptics might disagree with you with.
Are you trying to start a fight?
I was just wondering if there's anything that you think maybe like, yeah, in the communities that you're in, whether yeah, there's anything that you think is still something that you think most people should agree with that they don't necessarily.
Well, I mean, I could just say the word feminist and leave it at that.
That would probably be one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a great way to start a fight.
And it's another, a lot of those things, you know, I was thinking about this the other day because, you know, I have tons of friends in the movement, including people I disagree with, and sometimes I'll have two friends who vehemently disagree with each other and think the other one's just evil and terrible. And yet, a lot of it, I think, has to do with not having one-on-one in-person contact, because I also know people who would probably hate each other and write each other off, except that they got to know each other in person, and all of a sudden you may cut some slack in one area, or you may hold out hope that eventually you might convince this person on the one little thing that you disagree on, rather than cutting them aside. But for some of the issues, the conflict is often about, you know, two people who are using language differently. They're talking past each other. They're expecting that if they mention something in shorthand that the other person has the same understanding when they don't. And a lot of times I've seen more than once people who think they vehemently disagree with this other person when really they just maybe only barely disagree, and they can, you know, work through it if they spent more time on it. But much in the same way we were talking about with, you know, engaging with believers, you don't owe anybody an explanation, and, you know, no individual is required to care and take the time to fully educate somebody else on what their view is. There are lots of areas where, like, I probably part ways with a lot of my liberal progressive friends on guns. I don't get some of the hyperbole that seems to be thrown out about guns, but then I grew up with guns, so it wasn't as big a deal for me. And I don't run, you know, I live in Texas. Not everybody here is packing, and I don't run around in fear that everybody is packing. I think the conversation on that has been very problematic, because there are people who are ridiculously passionate of, don't take away my right to carry an AK-47 into a Chipotle, as was mentioned last night at Esther's. And there are other people who are like, oh, no guns, no nothing. And I won't say that the best response is directly in the middle, but I don't think it's necessarily out at either end.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me, guys.
Sure, thanks for calling.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
All right.
The one thing I will say is that sometimes what some people might perceive to be a small disagreement is actually bigger for one side than the other. So, you know, I've had people say to me that, oh, it's not that big a deal that we disagree about gender issues, but as somebody who is going to face the flip side of that, it's going to matter to me more than someone who doesn't. So, okay, this guy uses, you know, he has misogynist views, and to a man it's like no big deal, but for me it's going to be a big deal, so.
Yeah, you can go ahead and queue up any one of the callers and we'll just take it when it's live.
Yeah.
Part of the thing is, we are stuck. we have to interpret the world based on our own experience and our own understanding. And I don't know what it's like to live life as you live.
Yeah.
And so there's this perception of, oh, well, this isn't a big deal, not only because I can't experience what you experience, but also because I project my view on the rest of the world. So there are, it's difficult for me to sometimes imagine how terrible some people can be because I don't experience it, and because I would like to think that they're more like me.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'm not terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people say, well, he may be a raging misogynist, but he's actually a nice guy if you get to know him. I'm like, but why would I want to get to know him? He thinks I'm inferior.
All right, so we got Seth in Cincinnati. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having me on. Sorry for the obligatory long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you today about exclusion. And there seems to be kind of a theme going on in some of your answers about how you're not really required to convince anyone or to explain yourself to them. But my position, or my situation, kind of deals with this. Recently, I was working at a fundraiser with my father for his organization he belongs to, and he's a Freemason. And I'm not sure how much you guys know about Freemasonry, but God is very much involved, and although they have a very deistic kind of view, it's very much obligatory, and part of their kind of creed that they say is that they specifically exempt atheists. In particular, they say that they will never knowingly allow an atheist to join the organization. So while I was at this fundraiser, and I was there for my father to help him, several of the other members kind of came up and just in passing talked to me about joining. And I felt very conflicted because I felt that they don't really appreciate the fact that here's this great guy who's helping out, and he happens to be an atheist, and we can't let him in our club. And the other problem I have is that I'm not quite sure how to talk to my father about it because even though I've talked to him about my views, I think he's kind of more in denial that you're not religious, but you're spiritual kind of viewpoint. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how to kind of bring in some idea of how it makes me feel to be exempted from an organization in that fashion.
I mean, well, it's hard with parents. I know how that goes because sometimes, they just want to have their nice little bubble and think that, oh, it's just a phase, or, oh, it's not as strong as I think it is. But then, you are an atheist. You're not just spiritual or something like that. As far as the exemption or exclusion go, does he want you to join or something and you can't, or what's going on with that?
Oh, well, I mean, again, going back to Freemasonry, they have a very deistic kind of approach to God as a grand architect, and they don't require any specific religious kind of position with the exception of believing in a God. Mm-hmm. So the fact of having the position that you reject God, like part of the creed they give is that they will never knowingly allow certain types of people to join, and it's actually funny because they qualify it with three things. One is a fool, the other is an old man who's senile, and the third is an atheist. I thought that's kind of a weird kind of clustering of that. And like I said, I wouldn't really care about what the other members might think of me or say, but I find it odd that here I am helping out with this organization that would never have me as a member. And despite what the Groucho Marx comment about never belonging to a club but having you for a member, I'm just not entirely sure how to come to terms with that. And I guess part of it also stems from, it's kind of a double whammy because I'm also a Eagle Scout, and I always had an interest in going back and working in the adult leadership for Boy Scouts. But one of the reasons why the Boy Scouts allowed gays and open homosexuals to be leaders is because they didn't want to be forced to have to allow atheists as well. So I kind of feel like all my interests and backgrounds are exempting atheists in particular.
Yeah, now I'm in a, I guess, slightly different situation because I wouldn't want to be a member of either of those organizations, so I'm fine with the fact that they want to exclude me. I'm happy to point out that there's no good reason for their exclusion, and this tells us a lot more about what kind of organization they actually are. There's plenty of organizations that do good work that are terrible on some other issue. The Boy Scouts have been that way forever. Masons and Shriners and all kinds of organizations that do positive stuff are going to have some screwy views that exclude people who are perfectly willing and capable to do that good work. And it tells more about what they consider to be important, much in the same way that some churches who have been involved in scandals, their focus is always on protecting the church. It's not about making amends and properly dealing with the victims. And in many cases, they have gone out of their way to hinder legal investigations. And so when I look at them, I don't say, oh, they're doing such good work, I wish they'd let me in. I look at it and say, okay, so they've done some good things, and they're really, really terrible here and there. I'd rather work with an organization that's going to do the good things without the baggage. And because of that, the only actual answer I can give to what you're talking about in dealing with your dad is just to keep being honest. And when it comes to dealing with that group, keep being who you are, because eventually there's going to be a bunch of people in that group who are going to recognize, hey, we've got this guy who's awesome and he's doing good work and, he's helping us out, and we'd love to have him as an actual member, but something about our policies excludes him. And why is that the case? Why would our policies be such that they would exclude good people who are willing to work with us? And, that's how changes happen. When people start recognizing, maybe we've got a bad policy.
And I would also suggest that I heard about scouting organizations that aren't the Boy Scouts that do similar work, but they don't exclude people. I think they mostly sprung up around gay members, although I think there's some religious concerns too. You might want to look around and see in your area if there are organizations like that, so maybe you can feel like you're part of a group that welcomes you a little bit more, because it's not a good feeling to feel like, people don't want you.
Definitely.
Hello?
Sure, I'm sorry, I thought you were saying something. I was just going to say that a big part of what drives me in this is that I'm a big advocate of the out approach to atheism, and how I don't just want to say, these organizations don't want to have me, so I'll just find someone else. I'd rather be the guy, like you mentioned, who shows off his qualities and to say, and I'm an atheist too, and it's okay that I can't be in your club. I still want to help out, my dad in this thing that he's passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of options. You either set aside the differences and work with them because they're working on a good goal. You can work to try to change the organizations, or you can work with different organizations or start a new one. They're all viable paths to getting good stuff done. I've, not just a couple weeks ago, I was mentioning that it may not be worthwhile to go out and reinvent the wheel. If you're wanting to do a particular charity work, and there's already an organization that does it, helping them on that goal isn't necessarily an endorsement of everything that they stand for. If it happens to be the most efficient way to, get food to the needy or something, then you working with them, at least temporarily, until you find a better path, a way to get rid of the religious baggage or the bigotry, it may be the best way to do the most good.
Definitely. I think all I can do is just, be myself and do the good things that are in my heart, and just show people that just because I have an answer to one question that differs from them doesn't mean that I'm, someone you can't associate with.
Yep.
Sounds good to me. Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
All right, and Phil's going to go ahead and queue up another caller for us. It's, we did in Pennsylvania, we had a thing at the end of the convention where we packed up food to feed the homeless.
Yeah, I saw the pictures.
It was great stuff. We were actually working for an organization that I'm pretty sure has religious ties. We were in direct competition with the church to see which of us could do it, and they made it a lot of fun. But as soon as you start talking about religion or churches, one thing to remember is that they're not all the same. For example, yesterday you spoke at a Methodist church in Austin.
Yeah, no, and I've done sermons at Unitarian churches before. I mean, but they're Unitarians. But yeah, actually one of the groups in Southern California that I do work with for their food pantry, a big thing that some atheist groups in the area do is they try to gather food and get it donated in the middle of the year, because they always get a lot of food at Thanksgiving and Christmas, but by June there's nothing. And it's really bad, especially for families, because kids stop getting school lunches in the summer, and so they need more food more than ever. So, you know, we would get food in July, and the guy who runs it is a former minister, but, you know, he's a good person, and, you know, it's a good organization doing excellent work.
All right, I think we got Jasper in New Zealand on.
Hello?
Hey, Jasper.
All right, I wanted to talk a little bit about feminism, I guess, or ask you guys, and it's kind of good that your guest is here, because it kind of relates to it. Why do you think feminism is needed, I guess?
That's a very big question that you just asked. Well, where do we start? Why don't we, well, someday I'll do a screen cap of my email inbox and my other folder on Facebook. We can start there. I mean, the differences, you know, in the way that people treat men versus people like me is staggering, and people don't always realize that that's the case because they're not living it every single day. You know, things like, you know, not being able to check my messages without someone, you know, hurling abuse on me based on my looks or based on what they perceive to be my lack of adherence to gender norms. You know, and this is a very sort of mundane thing for me, but, you know, it's a problem. I shouldn't have to live my life like that. Or, you know, even going out of my house and walking on the street, no matter what I'm wearing, being treated like I'm public property to be commented on, or to be, you know, treated like nothing but a sexual piece of meat. That's not okay. And the whole point of feminism is to say that's not okay. We shouldn't just lay down and take it. We should be able to stand up and say this is wrong, and this is obviously hindering people in their development as human beings and their lives and their dignity. And yeah, so that's a start. That's a start for why we need feminism.
And I think for me, it seems obvious to me that we're not post-sexism.
No.
And it can be, sometimes it's, you know, obvious things that cause a huge problem, and sometimes, and I'm not trying to pick on a previous caller, but sometimes it's little things, like someone who calls in and has a conversation with us and tells Heina that she's beautiful and wonderful and implies that I'm smart. I mean, that's a disparity in how you're viewing the two people who are talking. And it's not like, oh my gosh, let's go find that guy and beat him up for being, you know, terrible. That's not it. It's about having a conversation that raises people's awareness so that they can perhaps be more considerate about their actions towards people.
So really it's just like social issues and stuff with like, you know, we need to stop street harassment, we need to stop online harassment against women, and like, you know, small kind of compliments and stuff.
It's not really a compliment to only be told you're there for decoration. I don't think it's a compliment when my intellect is never addressed, even though I'd like to think I'm kind of smart and have some good things to say.
I don't know what his intentions were, obviously, but I think it was just like he was paying Matt a compliment, and he was like, oh, I better compliment her as well.
It may just have been the case that I'm not pretty enough to compliment on being pretty, and so he had to come up with something else.
But either way, you know, it's not one instance. It's these instances over and over. It's death by a million paper cuts. It's, you know, never getting to hear about how smart I am, which I'd like to think I am. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. But it's not just social issues, though. There's economic issues. You know, there's things that sort of compound and compound and compound. You know, the fact that, you know, equal pay for equal work is still not something that we have. You know, there's still so many times, and especially I would say, I don't know how it is out in New Zealand, but in the United States it's considered gauche to talk about your income, and that ends up being a problem because you find out that, you know, the lady who's been working there for 20 years is making way less than the guy that's been working there for 10 years. So that's also a systemic problem. The lack of support, especially in the U.S., for families is a problem too. You know, the number one indicator, like, I think the number one demographic group that lives in poverty is single mothers. there's just no support for people who, they talk about family values, but it's not really a family value. It's, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and it just ends up affecting women more. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of problems. Let's go international with it. Why is it, forced marriages, child brides, female genital mutilation, the list goes on and on. Women have just been picked on throughout history more than men, and in different and more intense ways than men. And I'm not discounting, of course, men have problems too, and there's social class issues, you name it. But yeah, there is a particular problem there.
And I think a lot of this is anytime we label something, no matter what the label is, we're putting something there that is a shortcut to a broad collection of ideas that we're trying to package together. And the truth is, because not everybody who identifies as a feminist agrees on everything or on every single issue, that this gives people get to pick out of the 10 different varieties that end up labeled feminist. Probably not that many, or maybe there's more, who knows. The people who don't understand are objecting to this one while talking to someone who's in this position. I mean, because we've had discussions about porn. There are feminists who are opposed to porn, and there are feminists who are every bit in favor of porn. And then just saying you're a feminist doesn't tell you what your position is on that particular issue.
But I mean, I feel like people pick on feminism more for that than other things. There are atheists who believe in crystals, but we don't get into giant flame wars over those in the way that people get about feminism. And there's also straw feminists everywhere. Because if I make a statement about, gender, people get this whole different idea of what I just said because they don't like the idea of a woman standing up, and that's just proving sexism right there. But yeah, people have misconstrued my views many times, or have said things that they've taken things I've said and somehow spun them out into these ridiculous things. But yeah, there's no question. And, feminists are allowed to have different opinions, just like atheists are allowed to have different opinions. And sometimes we're both,
Well, I'd like to talk about, first I'd agree that, social issues can kind of be remedied with, government help. But on the wage gap, have you actually looked into it? Because you might find, you said that equal pay for equal work. There are actually physical laws, right, that you can't pay somebody differently based on their gender.
And there's also laws against murder, but people still get murdered. I mean...
Okay, when you actually look at it, the discrepancy of the 78% that's total...
She didn't mention the number, did she?
No, I did not mention the number because I knew you would pick on it. That's why I didn't.
Okay, yeah.
Hey, is it perfectly equal?
Is it perfectly equal? When you take out those factors, like when you actually compare same work to same work, it's 95%. But once you take in...
Oh, wait. So you're saying that it's 95%?
Yes, but then when you take into account working hours and wage negotiation, it basically closes.
But those are gendered issues because women are assumed to be the child caretakers, and men do not pull their share of the housework the second shift. So of course women aren't going to stay till 9 p.m. at work. They're going to go home at 6 because someone needs to feed the damn kids. And that's a gender issue too. And then you talked about negotiation. Women are trained from birth to be submissive, to say, oh, I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you. Please pay me with your peanuts. It's only recently that people have been saying, hey, maybe women should stand up more for ourselves. But at the same time, there's a socialization issue that's not easy to overcome. The first time I negotiated a salary, I was peeing my pants because I was a recession-era graduate, and, I was happy to have a job, and I didn't want to lose my job. And, I've been trained from birth to be nice, to be grateful, to be demure. I know it's hard to believe right now in this moment that that's true.
But I think the big thing here is that, let's say there was no issue with the pay gap. Clearly, we still are not living in a post-sexist society. Clearly, we don't have equality everywhere.
And then there's the issue, too, of certain work being associated with women, the pink-collar ghetto, as they call it. And if work becomes associated with women, people value it less. So things like emotional labor, things like
I think
taking
it's
care.
more just supply and demand. Like, if more people are willing to do the work, and it doesn't take as many skills to do the work, then it will get paid less. You know.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, the people, think about office managers and assistants at your work. How much work do they do? But that work isn't considered to be valuable because it's not, you know, writing code or something. But yet they're doing a lot of the work. They're dealing with people's personal issues, and they're doing valuable work that's indispensable. But because it's associated with women, they think it's not worth anything.
There's plenty of men that do those jobs as well, and they get paid the same.
Yes, because it's associated with women now. They're doing a job that's
requiring the skill set to do it. You don't need to take a massive university course to, you know, do that kind of work.
Okay, but that's not the issue. What I was saying is that, okay, so first of all, there are men who do that work, but the work is associated with women, and it's associated with not having skills. Could you, I mean, the office manager at my work, I don't think I could do that job. I'm in a traditionally masculine position with what I do in tech, but the people who do the softer work, you can't go to school to learn how to juggle 10 people's schedules and tell the CEO bad news in a soft, nice way that'll make him not flip out. You can't take a university level course for it, but it is valuable work and it is difficult work. But, you know, people think, oh, because you didn't study in school for 5 years for it and go into debt for it, then it's not worth anything. And I think that's a problem too.
You could spend $100,000 to get a degree that's completely useless for a job that doesn't pay anything. So I don't see how that's relevant at all.
Well, I'm basically saying that those jobs, they aren't highly skilled jobs, I guess. Like, you don't need to, you know, get a degree in astrophysics or whatever to be able to do that. That's what I'm saying. So if those jobs don't require those skills, then they're obviously going to get paid less than someone who has a degree in, you know.
Nobody is suggesting that your office worker should be paid exactly what a NASA scientist is paid.
No, and those are two extreme examples. You know, there's way more room in the middle than astrophysicist versus, you know, office manager.
I mean, for me, she didn't mention a number on the pay gap, and by the way, the pay gap's not the only thing, which was the point that I was making, but your response to the pay gap was to say, oh, it's not 78%, it's closer to 95%, and in certain situations it may close. Okay, so what?
It's pointing out there's no problem there, and the fact that it gets toted by, you know.
So there's no problem if you're making 95% of what somebody sitting next to you makes. That's not a problem.
Well, that's not actually what's happening. Okay, yeah, that is a problem. And
okay,
you can
thanks.
Report that to the authorities. You can report that to the authorities and actually.
Okay, you know how hard it is to report something to the authorities, honey? Like, really? You know, I've been sexually harassed in the workplace, and there's a reason why I didn't take it to the courts. Because you have to have all this documentation. And in the United States especially, it's considered to be so gauche to talk about your income. I may not know that I'm being underpaid. I wouldn't know, because talking about your salary is considered to be, like, gross, like talking about, you know, your poop in the morning. So, you know, you may not know. You know, there's so many confounding issues, and there obviously is a problem when just being a woman is far more likely to put you in poverty. And, you know, even if it was that they just need to get more educated.
You mean having children? You said.
Being a woman. No, I mean, internationally speaking, though, women are more in poverty than men, whether or not they're mothers.
I mean, there's a great study where they submitted resumes for positions, and they put traditionally male names on some of them, and they put traditionally female names on others, and the percentages at which they were called back, even called for interviews, or eventually offered a position was dramatically different.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've applied for jobs with my initials before for that reason.
That's why a lot of women use their initials.
Yeah, H.O. Dadabhoy.
Yeah, like you know, like J.K. Rowling's or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Male audience, and that's why she, you know.
But you know, men can write books with their names, you know, Matthew Dillahunty, and you know, women will still buy them. You know, maybe women don't hate men as much.
Well, anyway, but with the wage gap, right? What is your solution to it? Because, I mean, either you're going to, I guess, you could pay everyone the same. You know, you go, you know, full Soviet Union or something, or you could, I don't know, force women to go into like high-paying fields
Yes, that's exactly my solution.
No.
I was born to fix this problem, and my solution is to force women to go into particular fields.
There's multiple approaches, I think, and these are things that those of us who are feminists often talk about and deal with. There's the personal approach. It's raising awareness with women that men negotiate in a much more aggressive way, and either women are going to have to negotiate more like men, which is not necessarily fair because we're raised to not do that, and you're asking us to do something different. But also for managers to recognize that and to say, okay, she's not going to.
You just said that women aren't as good at wage negotiation.
No, we are socialized to be nice.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's not some genetic thing. It's because we're socialized that way. But yeah, I didn't know that I could push at work. I thought I would get fired. But then I found out that men were doing it differently, and so, I was able to push a little more. But there has to be a give and take there, There has to be, okay, women need to recognize that men push more, but also managers need to realize that women aren't necessarily going to push as much. And there needs to be sort of an understanding there.
But you asked for a solution to the problem, and first of all, neither of us are suggesting that we're going to be able to solve every problem, but one of the first things that needs to happen is you need to be able to get the people like you who are suggesting that there's no real problem here because they're sitting in a position of privilege and don't have to live a life.
You said the P word.
I'll say the P word all day long because her experience of the world is different from mine. And we're not saying that you're bad or wrong for having a different experience of the world. We're just trying to wake people up to the idea that maybe what you've experienced in life is not the same as what somebody else has. Mm-hmm. And as people become more aware of this, then we can start to fix. We're not, this isn't about mandating necessarily anything. There are certain things where we may be able to act by changing laws. There are other places where we may be able to act by changing minds.
And that's actually where anti-poverty and anti-classism work really comes in. It's saying, okay, even if you don't have a giant degree in astrophysics, it's not ethical in a society, especially a developed society, for you to starve just because we think you don't have the right skills.
I think that's true. I think that's a human issue that there should be a higher minimum wage, etc. You should be fair enough. But I'm hearing a lot like the problem is social issues with harassment and stuff, and the wage gap where women aren't choosing to go into or they aren't as good because they're being socialized a different way. But I kind of looked this up before and to have a look at like what are the kind of problems facing men, and I found the top 3 were parental custody, extremely biased kind of court systems, parental surrender, that's one they wanted, and genital integrity, basically saying we don't want babies to have part of their genitals cut off.
Okay, so first of all, I'm absolutely with you on forced circumcision.
That was one of the first things that made me doubt my faith, actually, was when my baby brother got circumcised, and I'm like, what the hell did they do to my baby? But as far as the parental rights issues go, it's a complicated issue, and the statistics have changed a lot over time, but, there's a lot that goes into that that's not necessarily obvious.
If you look at some of the studies, and I only have what I've read, mm-hmm. You may have different information, but by and large, the difference in custody results come from men not actually seeking custody, which is going to come from lawyers making sorry?
That is true.
Okay.
I think it's something like that.
Sure. So let me finish the thought, because some of that's going to come from lawyers about what kind of recommendations, because they have been enculturated into a system where they think there may be more of a bias than there is. When men actually push for and seek for custody, they tend to get it at pretty much even rates. But that's not to say that there's not a big problem there. And the big problem, as I see it, is strict binary gender roles, that you're not going to wipe them out of culture, but you can make people more aware of them. Mm-hmm. And by and large, in much the same way that atheists are some of the most outspoken and effective protectors of church-state separation, feminists are some of the most outspoken and effective protectors of the elimination of the sort of gender norms that hurt men too. So nobody's sitting here denying that there are, but when I say we're not in a post-sexist society, there's all kinds of terrible crap. You can talk about the draft or any other number of things that are biased negatively towards men. We're not saying that the entire world, men are the beneficiaries. The truth is, pretty much everybody listening to this program right now is a beneficiary of privilege in some category or another, because this is on the internet. So you're already benefiting from some sort of privilege. And the fact that you have privilege in one area doesn't mean you're not horribly underprivileged in another. It's about kind of the trend line rather than the individual spikes.
And on top of that, like, to go back to the custody issue, often custody goes to the parent that has been demonstrated to have provided the most care. And because of sexist bullshit, it usually ends up being the mother, because she's the one who's expected to do all that work. And there's also, and that sort of goes back to gender issues where, if we stopped expecting women to do all of the labor with childcare, then maybe men would be a little more likely to get the custody that they want sometimes. But, as it stands, it's not fair.
But I will say, because we've only got like 10 minutes left in the show, and this is going to come as no surprise that while, many of us are feminists, under various different interpretations of it, I don't see that it really has that much to do with atheism or God. So I'm going to try to get to another call that might, so that this doesn't become the feminist experience.
See, I've taken over.
The reason I would associate it with atheism, and particularly your show, is because you guys are kind of a proponent of Atheism Plus. I see a remarkable kind of crackdown on free speech, freedom of expression. You can see this in university.
A crackdown on free speech?
Okay.
Here in New Zealand, last year, David Cunliffe went on TV, and said he was ashamed to be a man. There is a law trying to get passed last year in New Zealand which would invert the burden of proof in rape cases. Okay? There are...
I don't know.
Was a university
Jasper?
that banned white men.
Jasper?
Because,
I don't know about what's going on in New Zealand, so I couldn't possibly comment on it. I mean, I was there recently,
and seriously, almost nobody still identifies with Atheism Plus. So that was my first sign of where the heck is this going?
It's not even a thing. I mean, to be on being a forum.
Trends, free thought blogs and stuff.
I haven't been on free thought blogs in years, even though she's still there.
I am a free thought blogger. None of us identify as Atheism Plus. Literally none of us.
All right, but
and by the way,
social justice thing with Tracy apologizing for being ableist, and you constantly calling people batshit crazy. It would seem there's kind of hypocrisy there.
No.
Jasper,
the previous caller.
Jasper.
Yeah.
The fact that Tracy does something and I do something else doesn't get to hypocrisy. Those are two different people with two different views.
True.
You would have to be one person to be hypocritical.
And honestly, I feel like you're the one who's trying to censor. We all have to be in lockstep with each other.
And if Tracy apologizes for an ableist comment, good for her. If that's the type of thing. So when we talk about ableism, there are some words that I generally avoid using because of the response from some people. There are other words that I'm not going to scrub from my vocabulary. I happen to disagree with some people about how wrong they are, but that's the nice thing. Even if I disagreed with them, if I said, oh, that's lame, and somebody said, oh, that's ableist, I can say, well, I will make efforts to consider that in the future, and I apologize for using that word if it offended you. On the other hand, maybe you should consider that I'm not evaluating you as a person, and I'm just acknowledging that something that has traditionally been viewed as negative, without it reflecting on you as an individual, this condition, like cancer is pretty much a negative. But there's a lot of conversations that can take place around there.
We're allowed to have nuance, we're allowed to have conversations, we're allowed to disagree with each other, et cetera, and if you expect us all to be in lockstep just because you perceive us as Atheism Plus or social justice warriors...
That's not at all what I said.
Okay.
I said you guys are obviously, part of the social justice crowd, so... Yeah, I'm not saying...
And I'm wondering why other people aren't. Do people not care about social justice?
What? I don't.
Well, there's no problem according to him.
It's a joke, personally.
You think that social justice is a joke?
Yes. Have you had a look at Shirtgate? You know, scientist lands a on something in a comet.
God.
Hey, Jasper,
have you commented on my blog before? I think you have.
Jasper. So you think that we've achieved equality on social justice issues?
Let's go home, Matt. Let's pack it all up. We're done.
On social justice issues, what does that mean?
Well, so you're the one that said that social justice is a joke. We've talked about a number of issues related to this. I thought we were kind of in agreement that we're not in a post-sexist, post-racist, post-anything society, that there are actually problems in society. And if you say that social justice issues are a joke, that implies that you don't think there are problems in society that are social in nature.
I'm saying that social justice as a movement is really a joke.
There's no one single social justice movement.
No,
but
I'm saying, okay,
Jasper,
do you agree that at least lambasting that scientist, and to the point that he cries when making a speech of apology.
Why are you so bothered that he cried?
There's nothing wrong with men crying. Stop oppressing men.
Serious, you guys talk about harassment and stuff. The biggest bullies on the internet, I know you could argue, 4chan and, those assholes, but when it comes to the biggest bullies I've seen, social justice is. They have media.
You're statistically speaking wrong. Women are the most bullied on the internet by men. Statistically speaking, there are studies, my dear. There are studies.
I keep seeing that meme pop up, and I just don't think it's true.
Well, because you haven't experienced it. Because you're not looking at the study. It's not a meme. It's a study. See, there have been multiple studies, honey.
I'm still baffled because so let's see if we can hit this really simply. Are there problems in society?
Yes.
Should we be doing something to try to correct those problems in society?
Sure.
Wouldn't that be a social justice movement?
Technically, I guess, but it's associated with more than it's associated with things that aren't even problems.
So really, you're objecting to social justice movements that you happen to disagree with, and then equating that with social justice in general in order to say that it's a joke. Instead,
and denying science because you personally haven't experienced it, you haven't seen it.
Wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't it be better to say, hey, you know what? We haven't fixed the world. We should definitely have social justice movements. Let's have a discussion about what the real issues are, what I think is important, what you think is important.
That's what we're doing now.
No, it's not what we're doing now.
It's not. We aren't having a discussion about issues.
No, you're
pulling out all these gotchas. That's what you're doing.
It's not a gotcha.
I know you're kind.
If anything, you just did a gotcha before. The whole I did the exact same thing you just did, and then you were calling it a gotcha. I mean, I'm talking about hypocrisy here.
You just claim that social justice warriors, the people who are advocating for an end to privileged positions, are the bullies. That's like Christians saying that they're persecuted.
You can't be racist against white men.
Yes, you can. I disagree with the people who say you can't be. I think you can be.
Okay, that's fair enough. So
you can be prejudiced for sure. No question.
Would you agree with that? Your guest.
Oh, you mean I don't have a name, I guess.
Your guest.
My guest. I'm Matt's guest. That's my new name.
The generic woman.
Yeah, but anyway, actually,
are you going to call me sexist? Because
I wasn't gonna say. Oh my God, calm down. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay, honey. Do you not see how that's kind of hypocritical?
What's hypocritical? Okay, the thing is, I deal with people like you all the time. I don't know if you understand that every single day I'm hearing. I'm pulling. Anyway, bottom line is racism, as I understand it, is more than just being prejudiced. So I think you can be prejudiced against white men, but racism is a whole other story. That's a difference. But we're allowed to have differences of opinion unless you think we can't, because we're all atheism plus, and we all can't be hypocrites. I don't know, but
together we're hypocritical.
Yes, because we can't be individuals. I know.
Oh.
I just you talk about how you constantly see women, they constantly suffer this barrage of abuse and stuff. Where is this being tolerated? I don't see this.
So because you don't have their inbox. So here, let me give you two quick examples. I'm married. My wife had the best podcast in Austin, according to the Chronicle, and it was a huge, hugely favored by people. I know another individual who produces YouTube videos, and she came to Aaron to talk about the various death threats and hate-filled responses that she gets in email, and she said to Aaron, well, but, that's no surprise to you because I'm sure you get stuff like this all the time. And Aaron said no. And as a matter of fact, I don't either. And so when this individual does something wrong, what happens is people post modified pictures of their face with semen all over it. They'll send out rape threats and death threats. I don't get anything like that. And I've sat here with countless women in the movement talking about the sort of responses they get compared to the sort of responses I get. And I've also talked to the men in the movement. There's a clear delineation between the sort of responses and treatment that women get online than what I get and what other men get.
And you keep saying you don't see it, and I keep telling you you can look up the studies, and you called it a meme and denied it. So just do your homework. Do your homework.
What I meant when I said that is like I hear it a lot in video games, like women are harassed in video games and like all this sexism online and stuff. And I see a lot of articles about it, but I don't. I see a lot of I see it a lot like is it possible that it's all just people get death threats all the time?
No, not as much. Not as much. There's a marked difference. We are telling you that there's evidence for that. If you're going to deny it just because you personally haven't experienced it, we don't really have anything to talk about. But as an experiment, maybe try just picking a female handle and going on any given website and post what you normally post, if that's what it takes for you to understand the difference. I mean, there have been men who created female dating profiles or female accounts on websites, and they have been shocked. They were just like you. They thought, oh, it's all bullshit, it's all made up, it's all in your head, hysterical woman. But when they actually put themselves in that position, they understood how bad it is. And so maybe that's the only thing that's going to get through to you, maybe.
I'd also recommend just doing a quick Google for dog and lizard privilege, and you'll find a great article that will explain this sort of thing. But on that note, let's try to get one other non-social justice-y call in before we wrap it up here for the day. Thanks, Jasper. It's one of the things when we try to have the conversations, people they're terrified of what, we heard about, it's about free speech. And no. First of all, my Facebook wall is mine. Mm-hmm. You can think I'm wrong for blocking you. You can think I'm wrong for setting it to friends only. That's fine. You can then go to your Facebook and talk shit about me all you want. Mm-hmm. But not allowing you access to my wall and my audience is not a violation of your free speech. Free speech is a legal thing at a government level.
And did you read the TOS when you joined Facebook? You don't have free speech on there. Yeah. They can ban you and block you and do all kinds of things to you based on things you say. So
we got Mohammed in Dubai. How are you?
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for waiting.
No problem. This is the third time I called this show, so I'm sure you've heard me a couple of times. So I wanted to just quickly talk about some argument that I've recently read on Bill Gregg's website. Mm-hmm. I know you've been dealing a lot with, you've dealt with the Kalam argument, you've dealt with the design argument and so, but this one argument that struck me as interesting, I'm not saying that I agree with it, I'm just going to lay it out for you and then you can comment on it.
Sure.
So the argument goes as follows. 1, it is possible that a maximally great being exists.
I disagree.
2, what's that?
I disagree.
Let me lay it out. Let me lay it out.
I'm happy to have you lay it out. I'm happy to have you lay it out. So there's a reason why I interrupt.
You can tell me where the fallacies are in this argument. So
there may not be. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying the arguments are it is possible that a maximally great. It's not asserting that it does exist. It's just saying it's possible.
I understand that.
Okay.
And I'm not in agreement that it is possible.
Okay.
I don't see any demonstration that it is possible that a maximally great being exists.
I hear you, Matt.
And so if you reject a single premise from the argument, the rest of the argument is irrelevant.
Okay, so my understanding is that a position of an atheist is not one that does not hold the belief that a God exists.
Correct.
But does not hold the belief that no God exists.
Not necessarily.
Well, I mean, that would be something that's asserting a belief that no God.
Yes, there's a distinction between weak atheism and strong atheism, or
correct.
Yeah,
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. But I'm saying that let's talk from a weak atheist point of view. That
I am talking from a weak atheist point of view. I am not convinced that it is possible that a maximally good or maximally great being exists. Where is the demonstration that that is actually possible? There are people who would say
anything is possible.
No, I don't agree that anything is possible. When has it been demonstrated that anything is possible? That's the cheat in the argument. Their justification for saying it's possible that a maximally great being exists is because it has not been demonstrated as impossible. That is a fallacy.
Okay. Okay, wait. Is it okay? Is it possible that I'm not saying that you hold the belief a God exists.
I agree.
Understand what a position of an atheist is. I'm saying that is it possible that a God, whatever that God is, exists? I mean, does the possibility exist? I'm not saying that the God.
I don't know. You'd have to define that God, and then you'd have to demonstrate that it's possible for that being to exist. And this isn't me answering as an atheist. I could answer exactly the same way as a Christian, as somebody who believes. I'm saying that the claim is it's possible, X is possible. And my position is you need to demonstrate, not necessarily you specifically, but whoever's making the argument, you need to demonstrate that X is possible. And simply claiming that X must be possible because it hasn't been proved impossible is a fallacy.
Okay, the argument goes on. I just want, let's for argument's sake make this assumption that it is possible. Just for argument's sake.
Then God exists.
The argument continues. So if it's possible for a great being exists, then a maximally great being exists in some possible world. So premise 3: if a maximally great being exists in some possible world, then it exists in every possible world. Premise number 4: if a maximally great being exists in every possible world, then it exists in the actual world, which is this world. If a maximally great being exists in the actual world, then a maximally great being exists. Therefore, a maximally great being exists.
Yes, it's the ontological argument. I'm very familiar with it. I was familiar with it from before you started the first premise.
Okay.
I disagree with the first premise. I disagree with the second premise. But it only takes one. It only takes one to be done with the argument.
Yeah, but it might be difficult to convince a lot of people on this because they'll say anything.
I don't need to convince them. If you present an unconvincing argument, it's not my job to show that your argument is unconvincing. My job is to say I'm unconvinced. And if the premise 1 is what I object to, and I say, okay, you need to demonstrate this before I can consider anything else in your argument. What is the demonstration that it is possible?
And there are, you mentioned that people think that anything is possible. Ask them a few questions. There are definitely things that they probably think are not possible. I mean...
unicorns.
Yeah, things like that.
I think unicorns are possible.
Well, they're more possible than God, right?
Just a horse with a horn. Yeah. We've got animals, we've got horses, we've got animals with horns. Hell, I think we could probably genetically modify a horse to make a unicorn now.
Okay, but how does... Okay, that I understand, but just for my sake, how does the premise 2 and 3 and how do the other premises collapse also? Just so I get a clearer picture. Because, okay, I understand what your point of view, but then I can hear the response on the other side.
Okay, what's the response?
No, I can hear the response that they'll assert that anything is possible.
And I don't accept that either.
Yeah, fine. You can break that down.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm not disagreeing with you, man.
Well, then why do we need to go? Okay, go on to the second one anyway, even though we don't need to.
How does the second one collapse?
Say it again.
So if it is possible that a maximally great being exists, then a maximally great being exists in some possible world. If it exists in some possible world.
You're going on beyond premise 2. Just premise 2 is that if it's possible, then it must exist in some possible world.
Correct.
I don't know that that's true either, in part because we haven't demonstrated that it's possible, but also because you don't have any way to investigate other possible worlds. And what if its possibility is specifically tied to one possible world, which is not the world we're inhabiting? You're using a modal logic version of the ontological argument, which goes back to Alvin Plantinga and others. Craig's version of it is intended to be something that more people can understand, because Plantinga's version is something that nobody virtually can understand. So premise 1 is God's possible, and premise 2 is if God's possible, then God must exist in a possible world. So we didn't demonstrate that God's actually possible, we just asserted it. We didn't demonstrate that just because something is possible, that means it does in fact exist in some possible world. And we haven't gotten over the hurdle then of whether or not its possibility necessarily is tied to a specific possible world, which isn't this. And from there they continue that if it exists in some possible worlds, then it must exist in all possible worlds, because it's maximally great. But their definition of maximally great includes the idea that existence is part of greatness, which is an assertion, not something that's actually demonstrable. And on that note,
I'm trying to wrap my head around it. Maybe we'll continue this on another call. I know you have to end the show now.
Yep, we got to go. But thanks.
All right. No problem. All right, you take care.
Cool. Thanks to my random woman, no-name, feminist atheism plus co-host for the day.
It was my pleasure to be here.
Who are you again?
Heina Dadabhoy.
Really?
Of the Free Thought
Free Thought blogs. Oh my God.
I don't know how I managed to sneak in here, but you know, I'm glad I could help.
Anyway, we'll be back again next week. I think, Russell, you hosting next week?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, I think that's a yes.
Okay. He didn't nod. He just went like this.
And there was some thumbs up.
Touchdown! Russell's hosting. And we'll be in Nacogdoches along with a bunch of other people at the Free Thought Convention. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Thanks to all the people in the booth who make it happen. And I don't know if they're going to roll credits or something now. We're just making this shit up as we go along.